This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Flint. Today is February 11th, 2022. The honorary bell ringer for February 11th is Joyce Bell. We know we have the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. Joyce Bell is a really pure Michigan football story. He's from Benton Harbor, played collegiately at Wayne State, wasn't drafted, he caught on with who else? The Detroit Lions, where he played 6 years in the NFL. And Joyce, for all of his time for the Lions, his quarterback was Matthew Stafford. Thank you, Joel. Thought the undrafted in 2010 would be a clue as who the quarterback was. So, of course, he's playing the Super Bowl on Sunday. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the United States of America and to the republic, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please join me in reciting the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth?
Truth.
All concerned. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And joining us today and presenting our inspirational message, Connie Peters. Connie?
I rehearsed this message so many times, and I got it down from 30 minutes to 27. So we're going to be good, folks. What I have in my hand here is a plaque. You guys see this? There's a plaque. I don't always see this. This plaque doesn't look like much, does it? It's sort of beat up. It's sort of worn. It's outdated. But this plaque traveled with my mom wherever she went. And I never knew the significance of this plaque. It's the poem Footprints. I don't know, you guys probably have heard Footprints many times, and I absolutely adore this poem because it's taken me through some rough times myself. But wherever my mom went, this went with her. My mom was like, if anybody knows who Donna Reed was, that was my mom. Tall, thin, beautiful. I look like my dad. So thank you, Dad. So this plaque went with her everywhere. My mom didn't have an easy life, but she was a wonderful, wonderful role model. I loved her dearly. She stood by me in some pretty rough times in my life. And she had some rough times herself. She lost her mom at 20 years old to cancer. She lost her husband when she was 60 to pulmonary fibrosis. She's been through divorces. She's been through it all. And she stood by our side, and she's been there for us every moment of the day. But the story of this plaque is, it kept moving with her wherever she went. When she moved from Ohio to Michigan to be near the grandkids and us, this plaque came with her on Arlette. When she moved from Arlette to Grand Blanc, where we're at now, we got a little, over our garage, we had a bonus room, mom's apartment was there. The plaque came with her. She passed away 5 years ago on Easter morning, very early morning. And this plaque was on the wall in the room, and I went back there. And after a little bit of time, when I had a little bit of time to heal and recover a little bit, I started tearing down things in her room. And this plaque came off the wall, and I put it in a Rubbermaid tub and threw it in the basement. About 2 years ago, I started sorting things out to give to family members. And I started passing all these things out to them, like pictures and knickknacks, everything that was special to Mom. And I looked at this plaque. There's a message on the back that I never knew was ever there. I grew up in the country in Ohio, and we had farmers around us. We were on J Road. We were so original. We're on J Road, like a letter. And my grandpa and grandpa was at one end, my aunt and uncle, my 5 cousins were at the other end, and we were in the middle. So we had cousins that were our best friends growing up, which a lot of people did back then. This message was from my aunt to my mom and dad shortly before my dad died. And it basically said, Father Bernita, wishing you a very happy day. I'm assuming it was their last wedding anniversary together. Keep your faith and trust in our Heavenly Father. He does dearly love all of us, and he does care for each one of us and helps us. Time has told me this, love and fellow. So this plaque is going with me wherever I go, and I hope my daughter doesn't throw it away.
Thank you, Connie, for that message. That was wonderful. Rotarians in the room, please enjoy your lunch. Rotarians and guests on Zoom, enjoy your breakouts. We'll come back together in about 10 minutes.
On Zoom.
This meeting is being recorded.
Probably about close to 30 is probably about the maximum.
Wow.
How many are in the room, I wonder?
And everyone, hopefully we had some great fellowship at the table and in our breakout rooms. I want to acknowledge a few things today before we go on with the program. First, today is see, Reg Lancaster saw me looking, he got quiet. But past President Jean and Jim down there could see me give them the. Today is February 11th. And so February 11th has two significances. First, if you think of the date, it's 2/11. So today is what's known as 211 Day. If you're not familiar, 211 is a social service network available throughout all of Michigan and in most parts of the United States. If someone has a non-public safety emergency, think more of a social services emergency. 211 can be dialed on any phone, and they'll get connected to individuals to help them find assistance. So for example, if you're out and someone needs a shelter, maybe you come across a family, a mom with some kids, and they need a shelter. You don't know what to do. Of course, you may not know where shelters are available. You can have them dial 211, and they'll get connected with the assistance that they need. Same thing for food banks, or if there's people who are needing really anything that you wouldn't need police or fire for as an emergency, 211 is available. So today is the day that we talk about 211. February 11th is also the day in 1937 that the sit-down strike ended. So you'll notice I'm wearing a white shirt today. And that is because today is known as White Shirt. It's a day that we recognize and honor the men and women who participated in the sit-down strike to make sure that General Motors recognized the UAW and recognize, broadly speaking, collective bargaining rights for individuals. It's right here in Flint, and if you drive by Kettering, you'll see the I think the little plaque there for where the plant was, and also if you go over by Region 1D, they have a memorial behind the Union Hall that commemorates that, and inside Union Hall they have a number of pictures of the sit-down strikers and the women from the Women's Emergency Brigade who provided the assistance to keep the strike going. Also this week, a few years after the sit-down strike, was the last week in 1942 when production of automotive vehicles in Michigan stopped. It stopped because the plant started to make the tools of war to lead to the liberation of Europe and Asia during World War II. So there's a sign of the last Packard coming off the line, and they said no more vehicles will be made until we end the war. And that happened, and we thank certainly those workers as well who paved the way for our democracy. In about 26 minutes from right now, the funeral service will begin in downtown Flint for Captain Colin Murray. If you drove in to the food bank this morning, or if you've been around town or been at the post office or something, you've noticed that the American flag is at half staff here in the state. The governor declared that in honor of Captain Burney on the day of his memorial, the day of his service, that we do that. Captain Burney was born in 1968 and was killed last Friday night by a driver driving the wrong way as he was coming home from his ship. He served the department, I believe, for about 26 years. I had the privilege of getting to know Captain Burney a little bit through his service with the department. He really cared for not only the officers, but really this whole community. I got to see him do kickoffs for myself and Mike. Young people who would come in the community to do national service after the police would go into a pretty tough area, get the warrants. Captain Bernie would be there to help them do national service, to do blight elimination, help the neighbors, get people to join their block clubs. He really had a warm personality. The fierce mustache and kind of stern look really don't give you the sense of just what a great smile he had, great passion for this community. And I truly believe he was a personification of service of self. And so I'd ask at this time if we could have a moment of silence in memory of Captain Bernie. Additional announcements for the club. Past President Mike was in Rotary International Assembly, was it this week? International Assembly this week, getting ready to be our next district governor. So apparently there's no turning back once you go into International Assembly. So Mike, we're looking forward to your leadership, and I know President-elect Elizabeth is looking forward to serving under your leadership as well. Under health and welfare, good to see Ellen back with us. You continue to be in our thoughts and prayers, and also your father. Others with health and welfare updates. If there are none, I will just say 4 announcements. We'll talk about it at the end of the meeting, but next week we will have Jefferson County Board Chair Dominique Clemens, who's no stranger to us as a member of our club. And then we are working on finalizing with this schedule for the end of the month, having Congressman Dan Kildee join us on the 25th. That's still up in the air a little bit, given that things in Congress are kind of always fluid in terms of when they're going to have votes. If he's not able to join us, we'll have Paul Rosicki join us to talk about redistricting. At the state and congressional level, it's a little bit like if you took balls and threw them all in the air, that's kind of how the districts went. So there's a lot of new lines, a lot of people running at different places. So we'll continue our governance program the rest of this month. Now it's time for our 50-50. And if I could have Fred Hines come up, and I'm looking for an honest person. I think I see Mr. Lana sitting up front. So Don, you can be the one to pull the tickets from Fred's bucket. If someone deceives Don Lana, he knows where to put your hands.
Here we go. Yeah, please.
Thanks, Amy, for catching that joke. I appreciate it.
Here, I gotta stand clear so that they know I'm gonna be somewhere.
Yeah. For third place, and it's the person who walked in right before me, 81672. Yeah. As I look at 7374, 75. Now this is either a lucky number, or I don't know if 81666. Ellen's gonna claim that as well. Okay. And for first place, 81686. Amy Crew. Must be present to win. So Amy is winning big because Amy stepped out of the room to take a call instead of taking a 5 out of 5, I think. And just won first place in the 50-50. Good job, Amy. Do we have guests to be welcomed? I'll start on the Zoom. President Elizabeth, are there any guests to be welcomed?
No, I don't think we have any guests on Zoom today.
Okay. In the room, I don't see any guests, but I do see a good number of Rotarians. We've got some full tables, and looking forward for a great presentation. I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker, who is not a stranger to Flint Rotary. Did the math, and I think our guest speaker has been representing either the neighborhood we're standing in or the neighborhood just across the freeway for about 17 years between Flint City Council, Flint House Representatives, Michigan House Representatives, and the Michigan State Senate. Senator Jim Ananich is serving in his last year as a state senator, unless there's some reform to the state constitution, because of term limits. This is his last year in the state Senate. He was first elected to the state Senate in 2013 during a special election. So he's the rare state senator to serve more than 8 years in the past quarter century. Was reelected twice. He's been the Democratic leader in the Senate since January 1st of 2015. He was, as I mentioned, elected twice in the state house and served on the Flint City Council representing the 7th Ward and was chair of the Flint City Council during his time as well. He and his wife were both educators. Their student right now, though, is named Jake, who's their son that they love and adore. Jim is a Spartan, don't hold it against him. And because it's a Super Bowl weekend, I'll say Jim is also a big football fan. And during non-COVID times, when we can get together, gather some great group of friends from all across his life, and we get together and watch football at a local establishment just up the road. So with no further ado, I want to welcome and introduce my friend and State Senator Jim Ananich. Jim, floor yours.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to do this via Zoom. As many of us have been dealing with this pandemic for the last 2 years, I think I got a sinus infection on Monday from my son, Jake. And, you know, with I don't have COVID, I tested, as we all have to say whenever somebody coughs over the last 2 years now. But I would be sitting there probably coughing next to somebody, and I didn't feel like freaking anybody out. So I thought it may be better just to do this virtually. I'm actually disappointed because this will be my last opportunity as an elected official, at least for a while, to be able to come and give you sort of an update about what's going on in Lansing. I've done it before as a city council person. I've done it when we used to do it at Sarvis, for those that have been in the group for a long time. I've done it as a state representative along with some of my other colleagues. And I've done it as a state senator on a few occasions. The last time I think I did it, my cousin George, I believe, was the president. And I did it outside. It tells you it must have been a different month because nobody would be doing a Zoom from outside this year at this time. I want to first thank everybody for having me. I've always enjoyed coming. I've always enjoyed the fellowship. I enjoy the philosophy of the group and both here locally, but of course, internationally. And I think it's really critical that we now more than ever stay active in our community, both from a volunteer standpoint, but also from an interconnectedness. There's a lot of stress and a lot of anger, not just here in our community, but everywhere in the world. And I think the more we sit down with people that we may have not a lot in common with, or if we do have a lot in common with, it's hard to be angry at somebody when you're breaking bread, you know, sitting down, fellowshipping, discussing the community, versus when you're kind of cloistered up in your home, angrily, you know, tweeting or watching a television program, a news program you don't like. When you're together, it's really, we really see how close we are and how much more similar we are than opposed. I want to take a second to thank Kyle for bringing up the White Shirt Day. It's the 85th anniversary, as he mentioned. Obviously, a lot of folks in Flint and, you know, all over the country have a connection to that day. And, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about Lansing. I'll talk a little bit about some of the things I'm working on. And of course, I'll take questions about the state budget. The governor announced her budget on February 9th, a couple of days ago. About 2 weeks before that, she did her State of the State. And for those that are kind of interested, basically we get the second Wednesday in January is when we're constitutionally determined to start our session. So we did that. And then basically we really kick off the session with the governor's State of the State and the budget presentation, because then we start to kind of dive into the budget that the governor presents to us so that we can present her back with any changes that we've made Traditionally, we've done it by beginning of June. We're required by Constitution to have it done by the end of September, but we try to get it done earlier than that. So last 3 years, we've obviously passed a bipartisan budget where Republicans and Democrats and the legislature and the governor have agreed to a budget that sort of shares our common values. Not everything that we all, no one got exactly what they wanted, but I think that's what compromise is about. So I think a lot of our next few months will be, we have a significant budget surplus in the billions of dollars. And a lot of that's federal money. Some of that's just increased tax revenues that have been coming in, because even during a pandemic, people are still spending a lot of money online. And that's particularly where the money's coming in. The increases are coming in from online spending. So we have billions of dollars of excess in our general fund and federal money, along with infrastructure dollars that were passed recently. So we will start to see, I'm sorry, I got a little bit of echo here. Hopefully that stops. As we move from what the scientists, not myself, but what the scientists and public health officials will determine is a pandemic to an endemic, hopefully very soon, where we just, and with that, policies and procedures will change. That's what I think a lot of what we're using the COVID resources will go towards, the federal COVID resources, to help us sort of learn how to live with the ups and downs and surges, or hopefully not too many surges, but the kind of increases and decreases in COVID in our lives, because it looks as if that's something we're going to be dealing with now, much like we deal with the flu. We do know, obviously, that vaccinations are our best tool to staying healthy and staying out of the hospital, and we'll continue to push those and make sure that people have access to the therapeutics if they do happen to get COVID. Obviously, testing is really critical. Having access to testing, both at home and in settings, so that if you do get sick, you can stay home so you don't infect other people, and keep our country and our community moving forward. So obviously, I can talk more about specifics of that as we go forward. Kyle kind of mentioned redistricting. So for the first time in our lifetime, in 2018, the voters put in place a citizens commission to determine how the lines are drawn. For the last, since we've been a country, whoever's in power basically drew lines to keep themselves in power, and that's not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's a both party thing. In the last 40 years, it's been mostly a Republican thing because they've had control. Since the 80s, either the courts or the Republicans have drawn the maps, and they've gotten very good at gerrymandering. You go other states across the country, Democrats are very good at gerrymandering. So the citizens got together and put a commission in place, and that commission has been meeting pretty diligently all year and presented maps right before the beginning of this calendar year. And the House, the Senate, and the Congress will have new maps that are much more competitive than they've ever been, which I think is actually a very good thing, because I think we shouldn't just be held accountable to our own party. We should be held accountable to all voters. And the more competitive the map is, the more you have to actually align with the voters in your community, not just the people that are a part of your own party or the base of your party. So those maps are now finalized. Obviously, courts, individuals can sue and challenge those, and the courts can determine whether those maps are fair or not, or if changes need to be made. But as of right now, those are the final maps that we have. So that is important to note, because you're going to see a different map than you have for the last decade, depending on where you live in the county or surrounding area. You may have a different, you'll have different representation, because I won't be there. And you'll have a new senator, you'll have new state representatives, but you'll have new maps as well. So I would encourage you to, no matter what party you are, to research the candidates, research the map, and determine, what your district's going to look like. Some of the things that I've worked on, and I want to kind of talk about some of the accomplishments that we've been able to do together. And the company that Kyle works for was very instrumental in helping us get the Flint Promise off the ground. When I was in the state Senate, I was able to pass some legislation that extended the Flint Promise the promise designation to the city of Flint. When I was on city council, myself and Mayor Neely at the time, he was a city councilman at the time, but Mayor Neely now, worked to get to apply to be a promise community. When the law was first passed, it was only 10 communities were eligible. And then eventually they would add more communities if communities chose to not participate, or if they didn't meet the threshold. But that took most of those communities did not fall off, so it was staying at 10 for quite some time. When we applied at the city council level, we were I think 13 or 14. So we knew eventually we may get chosen, but it was going to take some time. So when I got to the legislature, I decided that I would introduce a bill to extend it from just 10 communities to 15. And 3 or 4 years ago, 2017, we got that bill signed by Governor Snyder at the time. So Flint graduates, people that live in Flint and graduate from graduate high school, can go to Mott, Kettering, or U of M Flint, tuition free, which we think is a great tool for, both for families that live in Flint, for families that may want to move to Flint, and to help with the ever increasing cost of college tuition. So it's obviously a big deal for families, a big deal for the young people, and it helps them make decisions about where they want to do. No, there's no requirement, of course, to go to those 3 schools or to accept the Flint Promise, but if they choose to, those are the 3 schools they have to go to. And obviously a lot of kids are going other places because that's the choice that they have. But if tuition costs are a concern, this really helps make it an option for a lot of families so that they can go to college. And I mentioned the company that Kyle works for, Consumers. They made a very generous donation right when we got this off the ground of over $1 million. Because the first few years of the promise, you have to show you can get private support before you can start to pull down state support. So having that seed money really got the Flint Promise off in a very successful way. So that's something that I'm very proud of that we were able to work on and get accomplished in the last few years. One of the things, because we've had resources in the budget, when I first got there, we were cutting state government. We were sort of still in the throes of the 2008 recession, largely around mortgages and the housing crisis that kind of put our economy in a spiral. So we were finding ways to do more with less. As the economy started to rebound and we've had more money, we've been able to do more projects. So we've been able to sort of help the state government, and this is my philosophy as well. This is one of the things I've worked with Ridgeway at the Mott Foundation on, is I don't want the state to pay for the whole program, because I think you need to have local buy-in. And it just as the Mott Foundation doesn't want to pay for the whole program generally, they want to be a partner in it. We've been able to leverage state resources for a lot of really important assets in our community. And I'm going to continue to try to do that with what time I have left. We were able to make a pretty sizable investment in Burston, as they're looking at that historic building that's looking to make some needed improvements, but also additions to their physical footprint. We were able to help the Sylvester Broom Center with the basketball and some of the recreation facilities they have there, both for Flint United, but also for the kids that use that program every day. The Sloan Museum, which I think is going to be a tremendous asset for not just our community, but just for the region as a whole. We've been able to make investments in that, and many more programs. The grocery store that's in the final phases in North Flint, and many more. It's been a real pleasure to work on a lot of these really great projects, and I think we'll have a pretty big impact when they're finalized. And one of the things that I'm hoping to get finished before I go, and I know Representative Cherry and others, in particular Representative Cherry, because of his background in natural resource, both in education and also working for the DNR, is to finalize and finish up the state park in downtown Flint. Because of our long history with General Motors, and our great park system at the county level, Michigan has 83 counties, and 82 counties have some presence of the DNR, whether it's a state park or a state forest or some of the other programs. We're the only county that does not have any investment from the DNR when it comes to facilities or state, designation. And the city, along with the state, both this administration and prior administrations under Snyder, we were able to convince them that a state park in downtown would be a great investment by the state. It would have a pretty big impact in the improvements that we've seen downtown over the last decade, maybe even 2 decades. And I'm hoping to get that finalized before I finish. One of the things that I never intended to work on, but obviously got sort of forced into working on, is sort of water issues, clean water, both in urban communities, but really all across the state. And one of the things we've been working on getting finalized, I'm working with my Republican colleague, Kurt Vanderwall, on a bill we call Filter First. As we're starting to realize that the infrastructure across all of our community, but across all the state and really all across the country is aging, and we haven't always done the investments that we needed to, we're finding that our water quality may not be as good as we kind of assumed it was going to be. I think before the Flint water crisis, I think most of us just woke up in the morning, used our faucet, and just assumed everything was fine. What we're learning now is that we have issues with lead, we have issues of PFAS, and so many other things that are potentially issues in our water system. Well, Filter First, the concept behind it, and we're putting resources behind it as well, is that we would assume that all of our schools and our daycare centers potentially may have water issues. And one of the reasons for that is not just the aging of the buildings, but also the fact that a lot of times they're not operating on the weekend. So they have pooling of water, they have stagnation. And the most important thing to do, you should obviously replace those lines, but while you test, that we put filters on all of the, in all the schools and all the daycare centers, just to have that precaution in place and that safety measure in place. We're hoping to have that finished by the end of the year. The governor's put money in her last budget. We're working on the legislation to get that done and to make sure that when you drop your kid off at school or a daycare center, there's no, obviously we have a fragile world we live in. Terrible things can happen. I think Kyle mentioned, Captain Bernie worked 26 years in the Flint Police Department, rose through the ranks, was a U.S. Marine, and he's finished with the job, driving home, and that's how he dies. Right? It's tragic, but it just shows you the life. You can't, as much as we all want to and wish we could, we can't control every aspect of life. But I think we can help to make sure that if you drop your kid off at school or daycare center, that the water they're drinking is at least safe. So that's something I'm really hoping to get finished by the end of the term. And we have bills dropped, like I said, myself and my Republican colleague, Kurt Vanderwall, are hoping to get that done. Obviously, we know public safety is an issue in our community, and it's an issue across the state. I'm going to work with my Republican colleagues and Democratic colleagues in the legislature and the governor to make sure that we bump up public safety efforts, both here in Flint, but across the country, across the state, and particularly in some of our urban communities where we're seeing an uptick in violent crime. That is something that I really want to make sure that we get done. We've also worked on a bipartisan package to do some police accountability, to make sure that the relationships between the police and the community are positive and they're stronger, some accountability measures. We've been able to get support from a lot of law enforcement organizations, as well as both parties, and hopefully get that moved by the end of the year as well. Another issue that I never expected to work on, but I've kind of been thrust into, is horse racing. I started working on it because Swartz Creek closed, one of the last racetracks in the state, a few years back, and some investors bought it a number of years ago and are planning on making some pretty large investments to try to reopen that facility. And horse racing across the country has struggled because there's more gaming options. There's sports betting on our phones. There's casinos everywhere now, not just Vegas and Atlantic City. And it's a very labor intensive sport. It's a very expensive sport. And, you know, for people that want instant gratification, you have to wait 25 minutes between each race. So it's not as compelling for younger people and other people that sort of want that instant access to gaming. So we're working on some legislation that would provide more tools for all of horse racing and allow for more options when you're at the racetrack. You still would obviously have to bet on live racing. You can still bet on simulcast, you know, you can look at the television screen and bet on races that are happening in other places. But there are machines that are operating that are pari-mutuel, that are called historical racing, that allows you to bet on races that have already passed. You wouldn't have enough information to be able to figure out who won the race. You just sort of know that the race happened in the past. Apparently, they're a tool that a lot of people like, and they seem to enhance racetracks. We've come to the determination you have to have at least 2 tracks in the state in order to be successful. We only have 1 left in Northville, because without 2 tracks, there's no breeding. People that are breeders move to other states where they have more options. And we're hoping to get that finished by the end of the year. Obviously, it's a parochial issue for me. It's an issue that I mostly care about it because of Swartz Creek. But I've met a lot of people that work in the industry, and they really are struggling. And they love the state and they want to stay. But if we don't provide more options, then we will likely lose that industry. So those are some of the things that I'm proactively working on. A number of other things as well that, of course, I can take when we take questions. I'm going to go through some of these my notes here. As I mentioned, the governor laid out a state of the state and a budget that I think kind of reflect a number of issues that we've had to put off for a long time because we didn't have the money to invest in. And hopefully now we can use this surplus and a stronger state budget to make the kind of investments that we've been postponing for a long time. The governor and myself and others, both parties, are not advocating for new programs. We're sort of advocating for strong investments in the programs that we've allowed to either deteriorate or just need more investment. So I'm really excited to see the budget that was presented to us. My 11 years in office in the legislature and 4 years in the city council, I've never seen a budget that was introduced that was enacted exactly the way that the executive wanted it to be. And I actually don't think it should be that way. I think the budget process, the length of time of which we take to dive into those issues, the groups that get to talk before us, excuse me. Sorry. Whoever was sitting next to me is glad that I'm not there right now. It really does provide a lot of input, both from the community members and sorry, and from all the legislators and the departments. I find that generally our budgets that get passed in their final product are much better than when they started. We're seeing the governor proposed another historic investment in education, K-12, which we've been able to do the last 3 years. Big increases in community colleges and universities, and large increases to our local governments that provide most of the services that we all sort of rely on. So I don't know time-wise how we're doing. It may not be a bad time to stop and sort of take some questions, and that sometimes will trigger some more thoughts of mine as well. So is that okay, Kyle, if we do that, or how do you?
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jim. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
I'll give you time to get something, a glass of water if you need it as well. And I'll mention, you mentioned the Flint Promise and consumers being involved. I did, for those on the Zoom, I did put $1 in the red cup. You got me a fine there, Jim. But I'll mention also, since Amy Kruger's here, another Genesee County son, Tom Boris and his wife matched and gave another $1 million. And it was a collaboration with the Community Foundation of Greater Flint. So Amy's going to put $1 in the comments. Okay, she put it right there. I'm going to start off with a question, I think, for a Rotary audience that would be really valuable to get your perspective. You mentioned shared values as part of the budget process. And given your experience both in Flint and in Lansing, you've served people of, different races, religions, political parties, parts of the state, economic status, a really broad group of individuals. Just want to get your perspective on what some of those shared values are, and maybe how can we promote more of that sense of shared values in our governments, thinking about this month when we're talking about government.
That's a great point and a great question, Kyle. I mean, I think, the governor's theme for the state of the state was, I believe in Michigan. And I think it's really critical. I kind of mentioned that at the beginning of my talk, that, we're living in a stressful time with a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And I think, when we really kind of put that aside, as hard as that can be, as I said at the beginning, we actually have much more that we share in our values than we oppose. If you look at, because we have such access to information, a lot of it bad, but we have access to information 24/7, multiple sources, social media and television, print. If you just get an echo chamber of just what you believe, you can really start to really think the other side is downright evil if you're not careful. And I just firmly believe that we all wake up in the morning and want to have a better life for our families. We want our families to be safe. We want our neighbors and the people we care about to have a decent job, food on their table. If they have kids, we want them to have either a good daycare, or to have an excellent school. So, some of the things that the governor was proposing, and I think we'll end up, it'll be different, but I think we'll see the same level of investment, is the strong investment in our school systems. We've finally been able, we passed Proposal A over 20 years ago. And since its inception, we had school districts that were not at the same level of funding. And the intent was to close that gap to the point where they get to the same. And the reason for that was there was some where had more money. We had a very different system of school finance prior to Proposal A, and each kind of school district was, with the school districts all over the place. And the intent for Proposal A was to bring those schools together. We were finally able to do that in this last couple of years, the last budget, the budget before, and now we can just invest so that everyone should have the resources for their schools. And one of the things that we're seeing, I think, both in our schools, but really across the board, is this retention of workers, getting folks to not just apply, but to actually accept a job and stay with it. And I think we're going to have to figure that out, because it's having a dramatic effect on our economy, and all sectors. I know it's the case in education. I know it's the case in healthcare. It's the case in mental health, and it's a case in a lot of private companies across the state and across the country. But we have to do something to address that. Those are some of the things I think that we can all come to an agreement on. I think mental health issues. I know, Kyle, you have a passion for that. You're on the board. Investments in our mental health, both for our kids but also for adults, is something that I think we're going to find some common ground on. And I think those are the kind of things that show that we, as much as we can get, kind of cloistered off in our own world, that we do still care about our neighbor, and that we want to make sure that they have what they need to be successful.
Thanks for sharing that. I see Mark on Zoom. Mark, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hi, Jim. Thanks for taking time and coming in. I appreciate
Of
it.
course.
I don't know if you're working on this or not, but I know they're trying to fix the no-fault auto reform. And are we making progress? How much more time do you think it's going to take?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I wish I could say we were making the level of progress that I wish we were, that I think we should be making on it.
Okay.
There's a number of families that are not getting the services they need. And there's a relatively simple fix, because we know who those families are. And it's not that hard to make sure that they get they should not have lost the services that they did. It was a mistake when we passed the final version. that never should have been in there, and we can fix it. So I'm hoping that we can make that change before I'm done for sure. I'd love to have it done before summer. I don't know if we will or not, but it's something that I'm pushing for.
Thank you.
Yep.
I see in the room, Fred. The question, Jim, from Fred Hines was, "What's next?" And he says that you're too young to stay home and make birdhouses. Although I think Jake may dispute that. I mean, he wants you to stay home and make birdhouses with them, right?
Yeah, but if you've seen my quality of my work, yeah, no one's paying me to do that. I'm not exactly sure yet. I do know that I'm not going to be on the ballot this year, and I have to make a decision about what I want to do next. Like as was said, I want to do when I grow up. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure yet. I love public service. I'm not somebody who is, my life isn't fulfilled by a title. So helping people, I think I can do that in either in the private sector or in some other capacity. That's really what I care about Flint. I care about our community. I'm not suggesting that someday I wouldn't run for something again, but I'm happy to take a pause and kind of see what's next. But I have not figured that out yet. But thanks for asking.
Fred, did you have an offer, or are you gonna reach out? Do you have an opening? President can use you in his backyard. Another question. Let's try on Zoom. There's another question on Zoom.
I don't see any hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. And how about in the room? Is there another question for
Kyle?
Fred Hines again, so get ready. He's got another question.
Kyle, I got a question.
Oh,
It's Jerry Hill, Jim.
go ahead, Jerry.
Hey, thanks I love hearing the work on the ground done by our officials, and it really sounds good. Hey, I got in terms of the voting changes that have been made in the state of Michigan, how do you summarize how they've been done, or and how is it going to affect the voting usage? I mean, because I just think we really had done a lot of good things in terms of protecting the security of our voters. I worked in the voting system for a couple of times, and I'm really glad I did. And I was wondering, is there anything that's going to be changing to bring some things back, or what?
Well, in 2018, the voters by a pretty overwhelming vote made some changes to make, so I would argue, update some of the voting laws in our state, allowed for same-day registration, allowed for no reason absentee ballot, which I think makes sense. I mean, I don't think there's any reason. We do so much. We've been able to figure out how to do things in almost every aspect of our life more efficiently, more securely, and voting absentee is something that lagged behind for years. And one of the nice things is, as much as there may be some misinformation out there and things of that nature, 2020 was a very secure election. There's been a handful of there's been a lot of allegations. There's been 250 audits done, but it's we know the election results were fair. They were legal, and they may not have been the outcome some people wanted, but that's how elections work, right? So in 2018, we put in place more options to do mail-in voting, to do easier registration, things of that nature. But with every aspect of it, there was security along with it. So there's been a lot of proposals this year, Jerry, but almost none of them have been signed into law. So all the restrictions and some of the bills that would have made it more difficult for people to vote, those have not been put in place.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so hopefully it stays that way. Really, we should make it easy for people to vote and make sure that the elections are secure as they have been for the last, 200 years. But some of the measures are just they would put a bunch of barriers in place and make it take a lot longer to count the voting. And in some states, you're seeing folks where they can just really overturn an election, which we should all be scared of. And no matter what political party you're from, the voter's voice should matter. And I think most people feel that way.
Thank you.
Yep.
And in the room, the final question, Fred. So the question was about transparency in Michigan's government and being rated one of the least transparent states. What can be done to address that?
Yeah, we are the least transparent state. We have, we're starting to see some stories now about former Speaker Chatfield and some of the use that he did of with the 501c4, which is a dark money account. Just a number of things that I think highlight how bad our state's transparency laws are. Some of the things I pushed for and have been unsuccessful, but I'll continue to push for. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think they'll get done before we leave here, before I leave here in my term, but I hope that they do. I think it's critical that we have personal financial disclosure. I think it's important for you to know that I'm not purchasing stocks or have investments or have interests in things that I am voting on, or I am voting to enhance my own personal income. I think that's critical. I think adoption of a FOIA for the state legislature would be, it seems like an obvious thing that we should do. There obviously would be protections in place for constituents and, constituent communication and things like that. I think we should have a strong ethics commission where if there are problems, it can go, instead of us, kind of instead of the majority party, whoever they may be, sweeping it under the rug, you'd have actual professionals looking at the issue, determining if there's a violation. You could go before the ethics committee before you have a violation and ask, is there, kind of get into legal opinion about whether or not this is something you should stay away from. There are so many things that we should do. I don't personally buy or sell stocks since I've been in the legislature, because I have a fraction of the knowledge that the Congress does. But I have information. I meet with consumers. I meet with DTE. I meet with General Motors, and I have information that other people don't have. And I don't find it ethical for me to use that information to make investments. So I personally don't buy or sell stocks. I don't have a blind trust, but it's basically what I have. I just send money to my financial person and he buys mutual funds, about as boring as you can get. But I think those kind of measures would go a long way to at least showing people that the people that represent them are not using that honor that they've been bestowed to serve our community, that responsibility, and using it to feather their own nest or to tarnish that office that they were elected to. So I think we have a long ways to go, but I hope we do some of those. I think those things. I think the public really needs to demand some of those transparencies happen.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Rotarians, for the great questions. We appreciate you joining us. A contribution in your name will be made to Rotary International to support the eradication of polio.
Great, thank you.
I want to thank the following Rotarians for their service during today's meeting. Connie Peters, thank you for that wonderful inspirational message. Terry, thank you for setup and takedown. I want to thank Rob Jewell for our speaker coordination. There's been a lot of moving parts, and Rob does a great job always, but especially this month. I want to thank Jerry for bulletin notes, and I want to thank Elizabeth for serving as our Zoom host. And I also want to thank Kimberly for making sure we had a Zoom host and telling me about people coming in. I can appreciate it very much. Please join us next Friday on the 18th when we continue our governance month with an update, as I mentioned, from Dominique Clemens, who's the county board chair. We'll also be hearing from our own Patrick Naswell with an update on Mott Community College. This is Career Technical Education Month. And so Patrick's going to give us a brief update on what's going on at Mott College as well. As you go about your day, please remember and take time to serve and change lives. We are adjourned. Bye, everybody.